The Final Fantasy Wiki Podcast is brought to you by Junkai Games, Winmo Games, Little Red Dog Games, Threaks, Crop Circle Games, Sony London, Threshold Games, Frog Song Studios, Tauros Games, Eggnut Games, Ridgeline Games, Deviation Games, Paladin Games, Possibility Space, Roll7, Intercept Games, Arcane Austin, Tango Gameworks, Alpha Dog Studios, and Roundhouse Games. And we're expecting a check from all those places. If possibly every single one of those companies shuts down within this year, I guess we're not going to get our money. But that can't possibly happen. All those studios could not possibly all get shut down in 2024, right? No way, right?
Jesus Christ!
Oh, that's brutal, man. That's oh my god, that's hard.
Well, it's been a rough year in many ways. And I did my best. By the way, I did my best to check research-wise and stay up to date. I believe that is every single studio that is shut down. There are several more that have had extreme layoffs, which means they are functionally no longer in business, but as far as I can tell, they are not fully closed. Every single one of those companies, though, they're closed.
Material?
I'm sorry?
This should be podcast material, surely.
This is podcast material. We started.
Yeah. Like I assume what's going to happen is that after Blue's intro bit finishes, we have the intro music and we immediately cut back to Jesus Christ.
Yes, that's exactly how it's going to go.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah, a guest editor, SomeColorMage.
Right, that's me.
Yeah. So welcome to the Final Fantasy Wiki Podcast. I'm your host, BlueHighwind, and that was SomeColorMage, and there's Technobliterator. We're starting on a happy note because this is a month of... Actually, this is not a particularly great month, is it? I'm trying to think. With the show we have planned.
It hasn't been great for Square Enix.
No, most of our news
it's a rough.
Most of our news is about rough financial reports from Square Enix and grand plans to move the studio in a new production model or whatever. And then we're talking about Final Fantasy The Spirits Within. A great movie. Whose idea was it to make us watch Final Fantasy Spirits Within again? Did I do that?
Whose idea was it to make Fantasy Spirits Within? Like, I think that would be a really interesting topic for the podcast.
Sakaguchi, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that was Hironobu Sakaguchi.
But how this whole thing came about? Because I do have some background on that.
Well, we can get to that later. We will have an in-depth conversation about Final Fantasy Spirits Within, which is 23 years old now. But first, we have to talk about the news. And it is grave. Well, I don't know. It could be much worse. Like, we could be, doing a podcast about the Hi-Fi Rush wiki. Times could be much worse.
So are you going to introduce those Square Enix financial reports? Because there's news in there, and we're not going to sugarcoat it. It's bad news. But there's also a lot of context that needs to be given behind them.
Okay. Well, we might as well start there. So, all right. So, the Square Enix financial results. This is a rough overview. I'm going to go off a tweet by Genki. Genki_JPN. I'll trust them on this one. Net sales over the last year is up 3.8%. Operating income, however, is down 26.6%. I think a lot of those losses are because Square Enix canceled $140 million worth of projects. Did we mention that?
Yeah.
Was that last month that we mentioned that, or is that new for this month too?
I think
that's new for the reports.
Okay, so that's also new.
I think they announced it before the reports came out, but it's new for the reports.
The net sales are up 1%. But
by the way, most of those were not. No.
Yeah. There's a lot of things going on. The net sales are up 1%, but only because they released 2 AAA Final Fantasy games in Final Fantasy XVI and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Also, Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster and Dragon Quest Monsters 3. The MMO segment is down year over year. Games for smart devices, PC browser sub-segment down due to weak performances from existing titles. Merchandising sales, though, are up 20%. So there is that. There is merchandising.
Ooh.
Yes. So there's all sorts of things here. I mean, the financials are all over the place. So Final Fantasy 16 was below sales expectations. But we do have a rough number of how much Final Fantasy 16 sold, which is 3 million copies. Final Fantasy 7...
It's below within the 18 months, I think.
Yes. It's well below 10 million,
I think...
which, let's say one were foolish enough to bet about that, they'd be out about $20 right now. Not naming names.
That's true.
That is true.
The initial sales for it, from my understanding, the initial sales were in line with expectations. It's just the legs on it were not. But they're still confident they can make up for it in the 18 months period.
Their theory is that it'll hit its sales goal within 18 months. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Yes, that's right.
Final Fantasy VII Rebirth sales do not have a hard number. However, within the reports, it is lumped within Foam Stars, both falling well below expectations, which...
not well below.
They did not say well below. They did not say apocalyptically
they fell
bad.
below expectation. They fell below expectations, and then they clarified that the sales are, quote, not necessarily bad.
Not necessarily bad.
Christian, what the hell were the expectations for Foam Stars? You released that on PS Plus.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
I'm just going to say personally... Final Fantasy VII Rebirth sales category being in the same category as Foam Stars sounds quite bad. Just the fact those are being lumped together. I
mean, those are the only things that came out around that time, right?
All right, I'll keep going into this. There's a few more reports on this. The general vibe is that they've relied too much on individual creativity. Then also they've relied way too much on PlayStation 5 exclusivity, so they're going to be pushing for multi-platform releases in the future. One good bit of news is Dragon Quest XII is still under development. It looks like the president of Square Enix, not Kazuma Kiryu, just Kiryu. It'd be much better if it was the Yakuza protagonist Kiryu running Square Enix. That would just be awesome. But he's having some big breakdowns, so quite a lot of projects have been shut down, and there have been layoffs in Square Enix North America and I think Europe too, mostly focused in the community outreach and the indie publishing side of things.
Yeah, which is rough, but
as things go, this is less bad than I guess it could have been. Right. But also the fact that many, many, many games have been shut down is somewhat not great. Content abandonment losses, $100 million worth of... $140 million worth of.
Which is probably a bigger hit to the company than Final Fantasy VII Rebirth not quite hitting 8 million in its first week.
Yes, so they at least have an excuse for sales being below for now. That they canceled $140 million worth of games. I imagine most of what was canceled was... the general vibe I'm getting is that Square Enix is maybe the last company in the business that still releases a large swath of games of variable sizes. Like, if you remember E3s 10 years ago, you'd go and see, hey, look, Sony's got like 6 or 7 games. Bethesda's got 6 or 7 games. All these companies would have all kinds of things. Square Enix is the last company that you look to and you're like, oh wow, they have a large portfolio of things coming out. Looks like the Diofield Chronicles level of game production, the, let's say, triangle strategy, those sorts of things, we're probably going to be seeing a lot less of those, which is disappointing. We're probably not going to see any more Neo Twellies. I'd say that's very doubtful.
It sucks.
probably will not see. What was the game you bought me, Techno? I liked it quite a lot. It was in my top 10.
Oh God, what is the game?
Paranormal Sites.
Yes, Paranormal Sites. The Seven Mysteries of Hanjo. Yeah, that was a really good game. And I didn't even realize it when I played it, but I'd actually been to Hanjo when I went to Tokyo. That general area, that's where the Tokyo Skytree is.
Oh, nice.
I only really went to the mall, though, so I can't really say I got to see the neighborhood, as it were. Didn't see any ghosts. Disappointed by that.
I really want to provide some context behind what a lot of the reporting is, right? And explain, kind of why we are where we're at. Because I've read... This is coming from, like, a lot of journalists and a lot of insiders that are explaining it, right? So, the problem we have in the gaming industry right now is twofold, right? But it's effectively that these days, massive games like 7 Rebirth, like your Uncharted, like your massive single-player games, they're not just competing with each other anymore. They're also competing with games like Warzone, with games like Fortnite, etc., for people's time, right? So basically, unless your game is like a 10 out of 10, which 7 Rebirth was, unless your game is like an extremely good game, it's hard to convince people to go out and buy it, right? Now, that doesn't, like, cover the whole story, but what's happening is that's why a lot of companies are having to, pull back on the development of those single player titles, because there's just an extra amount of competition, and it's competition of a completely different nature, right? That's part of it. The other part of it is, people have been sounding the alarm bells about this for years and years and years now, right? Which is that AAA games are just simply, the way the development was going, it was simply not sustainable, and we're finally starting to see the bubble burst a little bit. For years now, it's been, you'll notice, like, video games used to come out, like, when I was growing up, I'd get a new Ratchet and Clank every year. I'd know the next year, new Ratchet and Clank, new Jak and Daxter, right? Then it's 2 years. Oh, now it's 3 years. Now it's 4 years, right? It's like we're getting to a point where we're waiting like 6 or something stupid amount of years in between games. And that's happening because they require a lot of resources and they're very expensive to do, because as the demands become bigger and better graphics and more content and more XYZ, obviously the costs to develop that are going to blow up massively. So you have extreme high expectations for what should be in a game. Those expectations are increasing, which means the costs to develop are going to be increasing, right? Now, if the costs to develop a game keep going up and up and up, then something has to give at some point, right? Because the only way to make more money from it by spending more to get the game developed is either, you're going to have to raise the price of the game, which no one wants to do, or, you're going to have to try and reach more people. And that's what's happening to Square Enix right now, is it hasn't met expectations in that it hasn't met the, presumably in the 5 million or something, that it would take to break even on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So probably the sales are more in the, like, 2-3 million or so, right? So it hasn't met the expectations because it hasn't yet broken even and it hasn't yet turned a profit. Now, I personally am of the opinion that this game is either going to get Game of the Year or going to be in the running for Game of the Year, and it's going to have big legs on it as a result of that. I think it will in the end sell well, but obviously right now it hasn't done what it needed to do. And we can say, like, if that's because of the PS5 exclusivity, if it's because it's a sequel, like, we can give a lot of our own theories as to why that is. But what's important isn't that, oh, it's a flop and it only sold like 200,000 or something stupid like that. It's not a flop. It's just that it costs so much to make the game. So in order to recoup that cost, you have to sell a fuck ton of copies. Like
all right. Techno. There's a few other things happening here. There's a couple things. One is that PlayStation 5, in terms of I think there's like two greater cultural issues. So PlayStation 5, in terms of an ecosystem, feels like it's not as healthy as PlayStation 4, where it is selling tons and tons of systems, but it seems like people don't want to play games on it, which is strange. I can't fully explain why that is. It could be maybe... There's a couple theories. One is that everyone's like habitual games are still available on the PlayStation 4, so why upgrade? It could be that the system has had such a slow trickle of like priority releases. Basically, I've gone the last 2 years without playing it at all until Final Fantasy VII Rebirth happened. Like, I played like one game on it in all of the last 2 years before then. And a lot of popularity seems to be moving to Steam Deck and the Switch and all sorts of other things. The other problem is that the overall gaming market, the business of the entirety of the industry, is flatlining for some strange reason. And there's a lot of theories as to what's going on, what the greater cultural pull of it is. But everyone has been making games bigger and better and more expensive because every single year there's more money to be made. And all of a sudden, in the last 4 years, it's been contracting. And then if you look at the overall trends since like 2010, it hasn't really been growing at all. And that becomes alarming when you are a company like Square Enix, whose entire sales pitch is, we have the biggest and best of the entire JRPG genre. We have to be the best. We have to be the best looking. So when Final Fantasy VII Rebirth sells... And I don't even know if it did sell 1 million. That's the crazy thing. No one has any sort of clear report on it. Whatever it sold, it did not sell enough for the PlayStation 5.
You can guess based on the concurrent people playing it.
Is there any sort of data?
There's like, people have looked at like how many people are playing it concurrently, and the estimates for that are it's around the 2-3 million. That and like how many trophies people have gotten. But
until I hear any solid reports, I can only assume this sold worse than Final Fantasy 16, which is bad because this is
well, I mean that's
yeah,
I mean that's kind of a given at this point.
It's bad because one, this is a much better game than Final Fantasy 16. And two, it seems to be a much more expensive game than Final Fantasy 16. And also, we have Final Fantasy VII 3 coming out, and who knows what sorts of compromises are going to have to be made. Because that game's going to get made. It's too far along at this point for them to cancel it, but it's like, we're probably not going to get the same level of lavish... Maybe that'll be a plus, because I actually think 7 Rebirth might have been too lavish in some places, but it's distressing.
Yeah, it sucks, basically. But, it's like I said, people have been sounding the alarm bells on this for a long time, and now the bubble's finally starting to burst.
Well, what you mean by alarm bells is like, sorry to interrupt again, but like, I've been in gaming circles for like 20 years now online, and it always feels like there's some sort of existential threat that everyone's freaking out about. It's like, no one wants Japanese games. Oh, now sales this. Now no one wants consoles. Oh, casual games. Oh, if you're a culture war, girls are playing games or whatever other bullshit you want to get into.
Yeah.
But like, all those alarms kind of felt like Boy Who Cried Wolf until this year, in the last 18 months, where 20,000 people have lost their jobs making video games.
Right. Well, I mean, yes and no. Like, I mean, regarding that, like, yes, in the sense of, like, alarm bells were sounding that, like, long-term proved to be false. But for example, like, I remember when 13 came out, and the theory was, oh, well, Japanese RPGs are dead. Western RPGs are king. No one's going to play Japanese RPGs anymore. and the genre we can basically assume the genre is dead in the water, blah blah blah. 10 years later, that has not proven to be the case at all. But at the time, when that happened, I mean, it probably did feel like a real thing. It probably did feel like a real threat at the time. But yeah, so I agree that, like, as far as the quote-unquote existential threats go, that they don't prove to be as damaging long-term as they seem at the time.
Or it could be... It could be that all these things are just small cuts so that the industry's healthy enough to survive and thrive through. Yeah. But, like, the scars are still there of every single one of these problems. Like, when Japanese gaming companies went through so much trouble with HD, they did come back and did come back good, but, in the end, they were never like PlayStation 2 again.
I mean, like, yes, they were smaller than they were in the PS2, but also just, like, the audience for games now compared to in the PS2 days seems very different and seems much... Yeah, it's like, it's like people like to say, like, oh, Final Fantasy isn't as popular as it used to be, and oh, it's not, like, as popular and as people think it is, and blah, blah, blah. And they tend to point to, like, oh, well, look back when Final Fantasy VII sold, like, it was, like, the best-selling game on that console. And it's like, how many copies did it sell? Oh, it sold about 10 million. Yeah, and that's because, like, the big popular games these days sell, like, 20, 30 million. Right?
Well, I mean,
these days...
GTA 6 maybe sells that many, but... Different. I mean, how many did Baldur's Gate 3 sell? Let me look that up.
Well, I mean, the Witcher 3, for example, I'm pretty sure that's in the 20, 30 million.
Uh-huh.
Right? Your Spider-Mans, they're in the 12 millions. Like,
Baldur's Gate 3 sold 10 million copies based on some news I'm getting here.
Right.
As of February 2024.
Yeah, it's like Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy X. They were the best selling at the time, but that's because, like, they sold well outside of the norm. And if you look at the sales since then, they haven't massively gone down from those days. It's just that, the audience is so different now, and a big hit game is just so much bigger than was the case back then.
And these are often Switch games. Like, Tears of the Kingdom sold 20 million copies as of March 2024.
Right.
SomeColorMage, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, did you want to say
I was trying to say something. First of all, a lot of those Final Fantasy World ever sold 10 million copies. Those are over longer time periods. Like, the launch windows... The launch windows are probably within similar, or frankly, considering the scopes of the budget, smaller than what we have now. But they were big successes because they didn't spend as much. Wow, surprising. But yeah, the main thing is just that the AAA model was never viable. Like it's only really just gotten to the point of obviousness, but the amount of money going in for the same level of quality upgrade is exponential. You can't sustain that. There are not enough people willing to buy. There's one podcast I listen to who fairly succinctly sums it up as whoops, the limited bounds of a finite universe.
Right.
Yeah, and
exactly.
And also, just in general, I know Square likes to pride itself on Final Fantasy being like the best looking game that's come out, but when I think about what's actually good about it, that's never been the thing I focused on. Like, Final Fantasy Rebirth is the best looking game ever. That's not what I cared about. 16 is the best looking game. That's not what I cared about. Remake is the best looking game. Didn't care about. 15 is the best looking. Didn't care about that. 14 is the best looking game. Oh shit! It's too good for our target platform. Dial it back a little. Dial it back. And so on and so forth. Square can care about that all I want, but when talking about these games, that's never the thing I've cared about.
Well, here's my if I were advising Square Enix, and this is my layman opinion, right? I mean, 14 is a perfect example because 14 was a massive success for Square Enix, and I know you did say that the MMO segment.
Yeah,
exactly. I know you did say the MMO segment's down a little bit, but
there wasn't really a big, there wasn't a big expansion last year.
Exactly.
Their big income gainer for the segment is next month.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So if I were a layman, I am a layman. If I were advising Square Enix as a layman, I would point to that example as look, if you make a good enough game, eventually people are going to find out about it, and eventually people are going to play it, right? So I still am of the belief, I'm not going to make bets about it this time, because that was a mistake, but I still am of the belief that 7 Rebirth, when it will have the legs, and it will eventually start to pick up steam, because 7 the original was the same way, from what I've read. 7 the original, it didn't have some massive splash of a release at the time. It just, started to build up momentum over the year, right? And I'm still very much of the belief that 7 Rebirth will eventually sell pretty well, right? Because it's such a good game, and I just think it will happen, right? Whether it happens when it releases on PC, whether it happens...
Switch 2.
On that, I don't know when it's going to happen, but I just am of the belief that it will eventually happen. Right now what we're seeing is the market is going to start to correct itself in the game, right? It's going to start, and the reason I say that is because, there's been this bubble expanding and expanding. The bubble's now bursting. And now the industry is going to have to figure out what the fuck to do about that. Well, I don't believe...
The Switch 2 is going to come out, and a bunch of pundits' brains are going to completely fracture when Nintendo basically attains dominance of the entire industry.
Oh yeah, for sure. Right, and Sony are going to figure out what the fuck to do with the PlayStation 6, because the PS5, I mean... There's been some things I love about it, but it doesn't seem like it's been super successful so far. I mean, not the console itself, as in
Let's be blunt. You do not need a fucking PlayStation 6. At the moment,
right?
Xbox is dead in the water. They can pretend they're not, but they're fucking dead. And Nintendo is not going to catch up to that for over a decade. There is no need to continue pushing the hardware.
Well, all right. So, a couple things.
I don't even think they care about Xbox at all.
Wait. I have to build off of SomeColorMage's point. Whether you want better hardware or not, the PlayStation 5 Pro is coming out later this fall, and one other thing. Sony themselves are currently in the middle of their big soul-searching mission because the big Sony CEO kind of took over the gaming segment. He just appointed 2 different people to be running that company. They had their rounds of layoffs all across things. They're basically decided that they're going to punt on the entirety of 2024. They just don't have games to come out this year, which is incredible.
Yeah, hopefully Herman Holtz and I forget the name of the person they put in charge of the hardware side of SAE, actually seem to have some idea of what went wrong, because Jim Ryan is the worst CEO that Sony Interactive Entertainment has ever had.
Not a Knack fan?
He knew...
Look,
that's Cerny. I have massive respect for Cerny.
Oh, I'm sorry. That is Cerny. Oh, my bad.
Jim Ryan was a fucking hack.
Okay, all right. Jim Ryan would never have made anything as precious as Knack or Knack 2. My apologies. Yeah. Sorry, I blew the whole rhythm up. You can keep going.
But like we saw under Jim Ryan, this complete and utter focus on giant AAA experiences, despite the fact that when Sony really took off. PS1 being the thing that was finally able to show up Nintendo, and the PS2 still being the most successful game console ever. Sony would just do fucking whatever. Like, they just would do whatever they wanted. A lot of the stuff I liked about Sony was when they get weird with it. Like, they just had endless creative potential there. Meanwhile, in this modern era, if it's not like Horizon, it's a bad game. Shut down Japan studio. But,
yeah.
Like, who the fuck shuts down Tokyo Studio? That was fucking insane.
And shut down Sony London a month after you've just had your retirement party there. Wasn't even a month, it might have been like a week later. That was great. He has his big going away party, everyone's there posing for the picture, and he knows in the back of his mind all these people are going to be out on the fucking street. What a moment for 2024.
Yeah, I mean, that's rough, man.
And like, when we heard Jim Ryan talk, he'd say some of the stupidest shit. He had absolutely no idea that people liked these older games. He thinks that if it's not new, it's worthless. If one time he was asked about what his favorite game was, and his answer just seemed to be, rattling off the best-selling Sony games on Wikipedia.
I mean,
I don't think he actually knew the fucking company he was working for.
His quote about backwards compatibility really rubbed me the wrong way. Where he's like, "Oh, I saw Gran Turismo on PS1 and it's so old, like, why would anyone play this?" It's like, shut the fuck up.
If either of the new CEOs know what they're doing, they'll immediately reassert that, because Xbox managed to show them up on this, and now they've given up, so it's time to just fucking hit them where it hurt.
You have the alternate of Phil Spencer wearing his Hexen t-shirts, and then still shutting down major
fucking
studios.
Sucks.
Yeah, I know, but the point is, it doesn't matter how much you love video games or act like a gamer, quote-unquote. You can still be a corporate shill for the Microsoft company and try to force me to use AI in my fucking emails. Thank you so much for that, Microsoft.
Right, yes, but I'm not saying that Jim Ryan or any future leader has to be a big gaming fan. I get the impression from whenever he talks that he didn't actually understand the company that he was employed by to begin with.
Yeah, I still don't know if it's like an individual CEO problem or if this is we have major structural issues in the entire gaming space to work out.
Well, we're about to find out, aren't we?
Yeah.
I think it's a bit of both, personally. Like, the answer is always more complicated than it just being one or the other. That's part of it. But I will say, look, it's really rough for those who are losing their jobs right now. Like, it really sucked. And, my heart goes out to all of them. And I'm also going to say, like, this year, maybe the next year or two won't be great for the industry, right? But I think long term, I do think the industry will figure itself out. And I do not think that this will be the kind of existential threat that will get rid of, like, all the games we like. Because it's like you were saying, we've had these existential threat things before. There was this time where they were like, all the publishers were all moving toward live service. That
was like last year.
Game.
That was like a year ago.
Yeah, and they were all moving to it because they were like, oh, well, there's absolutely no profit in these single-player games. And then they released a bunch of them, and they were all duds, and they all failed. So they said, well, never mind, let's go back to single-player game.
Well, right? Yeah, well, what happened there is, like, all right, so Warner Brothers releases Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. As far as I can tell, it's a complete disaster. And then Warner Brothers is talking about how they want to make more live service games after that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the definition of insanity right there. But, I mean, so, like, I think long term, there's always going to be a market for games like this. And as long as there is, I think we'll be fine. Like, I really think long term that we'll be alright. But at the minute, yeah, it's rough, man.
Yeah,
and we don't want to sugarcoat that. It's really not a good time to be working in the gaming industry right now, and maybe not even a great time to be a gamer. Period at the minute. But
yeah, I don't really have a I don't have a grand solution or anything along those lines.
Nah, I don't think anyone really does. I think, we'll just have to, the industry will just have to figure itself out. The other example I'll use is like the PS3 era. The PS3 was horrible for the most part. The PS3 was an absolute disaster. Eventually they figured it out, and the PS4 turned out to be really, really good. For the most part. Like the PS4, I think really we got a lot of really good games out of that. That turned out to be a really good era. And, it's like, I mean, I think it will be fine in the long run, but it will take a couple years.
You know what? I have the solution. It's called Release Simpsons Hit and Run HD. That'll fix all gaming problems.
Do need to do that.
Absolutely good call.
Yep. All right, so why don't we talk about some other news things? This is related, but I didn't go into the details of this. So Square Enix has announced their medium-term 4-pillar plan. Do you want me to just read off of these pretty quickly?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
This was at their big, business conference. Pillar 1, enhance productivity by optimizing the development footprint in the digital entertainment segment. This includes focusing on the development of titles delivering, in quotes, fun that only the group can create and build the development structure. And this kind of goes in that general territory. So I'm not going to read all of this. I'll just go over some of these other things. Diversify earnings opportunities by strengthening customer contact points. Roll out initiatives to create additional foundational stability. Strike a balance between shareholder return and growth investment when allocating capital. So these include, there's some details here that they're going to put $100 billion of yen for total strategic investments over a 3-year period. They're going to rebuild the business divisions overseas, which is why they're laying people off. And they're shifting to a multi-platform strategy to avoid all the business speak there. Some other news.
I mean, the multi-platform thing is really good, in my opinion. Like, people mentioned Steam Deck earlier. Like, has that taken off more than I've noticed it taking off? Because I don't know anyone with one.
You know me.
Go on. Cool. Yeah, I don't know anyone else with one.
Like compared to Valve's previous attempts to get into hardware space, the Steam Deck has been a runaway success.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's not because they did the hardware right. It's because that they actually built the support under it beforehand. Like when Steam machines were a thing, Steam on Linux was still really lacking, and when it comes to the Steam Deck, this is after Valve has spent a ton of time building and enhancing Proton so that a Linux operating system is very close to parity with Windows. So
yeah, I love that. That's cool.
I'm trying to find exact sales, but it's hard to get some.
As it turns out, it's kind of like a Switch, but it runs Windows, so you can put pretty much damn near everything on it. Is a very good proposition for the gaming sector.
My guess is that it sold 3 or 4 million total units Steam Deck, which isn't that many for a console.
Well, it's like, it's like, in hindsight, I guess it makes sense because when I go to Best Buy now, there's all kinds of Steam Deck knockoffs everywhere.
Yeah, I have seen a lot of those things.
There's those Nvidia ones, which apparently they're good. There's that one called Backbone, where it's like you put the controllers on your phone and then you control
I hear that sucks.
you do remote play. Yeah, I'm not convinced that I'd like that.
Jeff Gersman was just complaining about that last week. The Backbone one, I mean, sorry.
Yeah, and then there's PlayStation Portal, which
apparently the PlayStation Portal did better than expected. Like, it sold out.
Yeah.
And they had to make more.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me all that much because I would be keen on it.
I will say I have, like, been in the living room and I'm like, I could be playing some Yakuza 8 right now instead of just walking the 10 feet to my room. But, yeah. I think the biggest thing is not the total number of sales that the Steam Deck has had, just that when people buy a Steam Deck, they play freaking games on it. So it seems like those who buy it are very excited in the space. So it's a reliable market to go and get your games Steam Deck compatible. Versus, releasing it on the Switch and you're dropped in the soup of all 50 games that release that very day, and who knows if you'll even sell 10 copies on the Switch.
Right. In terms of hardware sales, it's an enthusiast device. In terms of software sales, it appears to be. I mean, I don't think we have concrete numbers on it, but it seems to be being pushed so hard that it seems to be a fairly good way to get more sales to just support the same Steam Deck.
Knowing that adds a lot of context to the people, and it will sell really well. Like, because that makes a lot of sense. But yeah,
that is part of it.
Yeah. So in other words, going multi-platform is gonna help Square a lot. Like, I think there was a point where like getting the check from Sony would make up for whatever the sales they lost were, but I don't think I think they're long past that point. I think the check is not enough right now.
I don't think Sony even wants to write those checks anymore. It's kind of the view everything's going in. We have a lot of other news to get through, so let's just do quick ones here. In the AI department, lead animation and cutscene programmer Ryo Hara says that outside of cutscenes, the game makes use of AI lip flaps, which I don't really know which way they're using the term AI, but the lip flaps outside of cutscenes seem pretty low in terms of quality of animation anyway, so I don't know if you need to... If you're a complete anti-AI purist, you don't need to go and burn your copy of 7 Rebirth.
Like, that's I mean, like, this incarnation is probably greatly improved, but yeah, just trying to get the lip flaps to match the audio, that's one of those things that's been somewhat computer assisted for ages. It's not like you handcraft every frame of a talking scene.
And also, just a pro tip for Square Enix if they're looking to save money on the next game, you don't necessarily need to animate all of that, and you don't need to voice every single line in your game. I don't think that's 100% necessary.
Like if 16 has been better on their budget than 7 Rebirth, that proves it, because all of the like shopkeeper dialogues and stuff, they'd have everyone only say like half of their first line.
Yeah. 16's NPCs are extremely boring, but not just because they aren't voiced.
It's like, the other way to cut down on... The other way to, improve their margins would be, rather than like trying to increase the price of games, which they better not do, or trying to like reach 10 million more people, is to try and cut costs. So if this helps cut the cost, then I guess it's one way.
Whenever people talk about like increasing game prices and stuff, they always seem to ignore that DLC and other related money revenue enhancing things have essentially doubled the cost of a complete game already anyway.
Yeah, and there's some like former Square Enix executive guy running some sort of Twitter thread where he's talking about games that cost $150 now, and I can't really fully trust that guy's diagnosis. I think he's talking out.
If that's the one I know about, I believe that's the guy who most recently has been working on Silent Hill Ascension, so I don't trust his opinions.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah, that guy. In more fun news, let me just make sure. So starting May 16th, this is a couple weeks ago, Final Fantasy XIV and Mountain Dew team up and set sail for Dawn Trail.
God, fucking Mountain Dew collab.
Yeah, you can get a Mountain Dew Quetzalcoatl or something is what it looks like.
Mountain Zoo.
Mountain Zoo, there you go.
Yeah.
There, look, all right, so the mood's improved considerably. All we had to do was bring up Mountain Zoo, and we're great.
Hey, let's go.
Only in the US, unfortunately. Can't even get it in Canada and such. But yes, yes, Americans, you can get your Mountain Zoo. You can get. I believe the other thing was like something that you can buy repeatedly, and it's a food buff that it's just a bottle of Mountain Dew. You can get Mountain Dew in the game and drink it for a food buff.
Not since the energy drinks in Death Stranding has there been a food-related ad campaign this successful.
It is a shame that the PS5/PC Director's Cut version of Death Stranding removed the collab with Monster.
I know.
It's just a generic energy drink now.
Yeah. It's amazing that no one stepped up to go and take over that ad space, too. It was, like, right there. Maybe there was, like, a contract thing that you couldn't do it. So Final Fantasy VII, The First Soldier, everyone's favorite iPhone game, and I guess also Android game. Season 2 trailer has come out, and it looks like there's young Angeal in it.
That is Season 2 for Ever Crisis, by the way, because the First Soldier is still dead.
You know what? I'm so sorry. The tweet I'm reading wrote First Soldier, because they probably care as much as I do.
What you're on about. It gets confusing, because Ever Crisis is the game, but there's a chapter in it called The First Soldier, and this is a chapter 2, The First Soldier.
It's like chapter. As opposed I think what they're to like chapter 7 or so. Like,
okay, whatever the fuck is going on.
Yeah.
You know how Kingdom Hearts spin-off names used to be funny. Like Ever Crisis has really just inherited the title of what the fuck are we talking about from Kingdom Hearts.
I left out a very important detail, which is that we have Hojo, who is a purple Super Saiyan for some reason. He's got purple flames bursting out the back of him. And young Sephiroth.
Fuck, I should have watched this trailer before.
You should have watched this trailer. I have no idea what's going on with that.
No, apparently the backstory for Sephiroth in Ever Crisis is meant to be like really, really good. It's a shame it's only in Ever Crisis.
They'll release it in some way that people will actually want to consume. It'll turn out to be a side quest in 7.3 or something.
They better.
We'll get to find out why Glenn is Glenn and why he doesn't wear shoes. You know, Glenn, everyone's favorite. Kingdom Hearts is coming to PC. Sorry.
Because it's amazing how everyone has collectively just decided that the Epic Games Store does not exist.
Yes, my bad. It did release on the Epic Games Store, but this is the first time it's coming to Steam on June 13th. And this is
the first time it's coming to the store that people actually fucking care about.
Yes. Yeah. Comes to a store that people like instead of a store that people violently hate. So Kingdom Hearts 1.5 plus 2.5 remix, Kingdom Hearts HD 2.8 final chapter prologue, my bad, and Kingdom Hearts 3. That entire bundle will be coming to Steam on June 13th. I'm not sure for how much.
I guess everything except for Memory of Melody.
Yes.
Is that the right way around to say it?
Yeah.
It was funny how like the announcement for that was like the same day where Square Enix goes, by the way, we're doing a multi-platform strategy. It was
the
funny.
Thing is, this was probably in preparation for years. It's just that while we know nothing is really holding them back, the digital distribution of the Kingdom Hearts games just seems to be deeply weird. It's not like Disney says no or whatever, because Disney's fine with it. Like Disney doesn't give a shit about Kingdom Hearts as long as it's
they don't.
Money.
Frankly, the fact they don't care is how that series stays good.
Like hell, when it came to Smash, once the contract was signed, pretty much it was right. Okay, we've done all we need to do. Just ask no more about everything else.
Basically, it's so I'm saying like I'm not saying like, oh, they timed it where like they decided to do the multi-platform strategy, and then 1 second later they pulled the lever that said put on Steam.
Right.
It's
The
more
timing is really funny. It just seems to be a side effect of just digital releases of Kingdom Hearts games being surprisingly sluggish.
Yeah, well it's like Epic writes the check and then it's good for 2 years.
What I mean is, like, if they want to announce we're going multi-platform, here's our first example of that. Yeah, I mean, this is a good way of showing what you mean by that. If that makes sense.
I wouldn't be surprised if when Kingdom Hearts 4 finally comes back into the spotlight, they announce that, yeah, we're aiming for PC on the same day, or at the very least within the same year.
Is 16 on PC
well,
yet?
It might even be a Switch.
No, 16 is sometime this year.
Okay, because I remember in 16's launch trailer, infamously, there was a comment at the bottom, also coming to Steam or something. And then they had to correct themselves immediately. Like, no, sorry, we didn't mean to post that version.
Yeah, that was a weird one for Sony to make, because that was at a PS5 showcase.
Also, for Kingdom Hearts purists, this giant collection does not include the original Chain of Memories, the 2D version, and it does not include 358 over 2 days. It just has cutscenes.
It has the movie versions of the DS games, and the movie version of 358 Days Over 2 was kind of bad.
Yeah, I don't know why they haven't just made a version of that game that people can play. It's good. It's a good video game.
Just get Desmond May or something. 358 Days Over 2 is good. Recoded's plot is almost completely pointless, but it does have like the best rendition of the command deck system in the series.
Yeah, I like 358 over 2 days. That was a good video game, and I'm annoyed that no one can ever play it. They just decided no one wants to play this. I'm like, and people want to play Dream Drop Distance? You're just going to arbitrarily decide that? Because that game wasn't very good, I'm sorry to say. Anyway. Next thing. So, this is a small spoiler for Inside Out 2, but they were releasing this everywhere, so I'm guessing this is not going to be plot critical. There's a character named Lance/Blade, who is a pixelated video game character that Riley once had a crush on. And this looks like Cloud, but with purple hair, and slightly digitized. And maybe okay, sorry, I'm just confirming something. The character design makes it look like they're doing that anime chest wrap thing where like the girls pretend to be boys and like wrap their boobs up, but I think that just might be the armor shading.
Yeah, that guy looks so much like what a Western animation artist thinks an anime character looks like.
They look like a drawn-to-life character. Do you remember that show? I don't know.
Kind of.
It was on Comedy Central. It was really bad. Am I saying that name right? It had, like, slutty Disney princess. Drawn together.
I was a bit confused because Drawn to Life, that THQDS game where you had to, like, draw characters and stuff. No, you mean Drawn Together, the really shitty Comedy Central show.
Yes, it was quite bad. Yeah. The other day I was talking about Tripping the Rift, too. If we're going to bring up really bad 2000s, weirdly horny for no good reason animated shows. I don't know why I'm the last person that remembers any of these pieces of shit. Ugh. And SomeColorMage, you had more Final Fantasy XIV stuff, right?
Right, yes, because the same stream where they announced the Mountain Dew collaboration is one of the big Dawn Trail changes preparation streams. So this one was about job changes. Most of them are not really big deals. It's we're upgrading these, we're making certain combos longer, blah blah blah, the usual stuff. There are a few classes that did get fairly reworked though, like the big one was the Astrologian. So Astrologian, that's a healer that was introduced in Heavensward. They draw cards that have buffs on them. And this has always been a fucking hard mechanic for them to actually get working. So like when it launched in Heavensward, so Astrologian has always had 8 different cards, 6 tied to the main mechanic, and also these 2 special cards that kicked in certain situations. In Heavensward and Stormblood, these 6 cards all had different specific effects, and a lot of the gameplay for Astrologian when figuring out what was the best use for any card that you got in a given time. But, of course, which card you got was random, so it could still sometimes screw you. They reworked that in Shadowbringers. All 6 of those main cards had the same effect, but like they all had this exact same damage buff, but they had 2 distinct components. Like each card would either have double the effectiveness if you put it on someone who fights in melee range or someone who fights at a distance, and they'd also have one of 3 special seals. And once you got 3 seals, you could do this party-wide damage buff, the power of which was based on how many different seals you got. Everyone
these are
fucking hated
magic
this.
Seals, right? Not aquatic mammals.
Yeah.
Because that'd be adorable if you're
seals.
Collecting little water seals.
I wish it was I wish it was aquatic seals.
Okay.
But everyone fucking hated this. It was really RNG based, and you didn't have a lot of ways to mitigate the RNG. So for Dawn Trail, they've decided, fuck the RNG. We're throwing this out entirely. Instead, what you do is that what happens is that, first of all, that damage buff has been scrapped entirely. The other thing is that all 8 cards now have their own certain bespoke effects, and like the first time you draw cards, you draw 4 cards. It's the exact same pattern every time. The next time you draw it, it's the other 4 cards. So they've completely removed the random element from the class, and some people yell about it, some people like it. Who fucking knows? And of course, because this is the job action stuff, we do get our first preview of we do get our first full preview of the 2 new jobs, Viper and Pictomancer. They both have a kind of common theme in that they're both fairly light on the number of keybinds you have to put onto them. Like a lot of actions will transform into other actions as they go along. And like that might sound like it's simpler, but basically it just cleans up a lot of things. They're always very conscious about how many actions you put onto you have to put onto the hotbar to make it work, because once you go above 24, it starts getting really annoying to do.
That sounds awful
on a console.
Well, that sounds awful on a keyboard, having 24 hotkeys ready to go.
Yeah, but MMO players are weird, and but once it gets above 24, it starts getting it's possible to do up to 8 times 6, so
64.
Wait,
no, wait,
40, it's just twice as much.
48.
48. It is possible to do that without manually switching hotbars, but that's really annoying to do and relies on stuff like you can access this action by you can access this button by double tapping the right trigger while pressing another button, and that kind of stuff is reserved for buttons you will almost never press because it's very annoying to do. And so like a lot of these are fairly light on the number of buttons you press. Like Viper, most of its like standard attack things are actually like single combo on the button. You press the button, it transforms into the second step of the combo, so on and so forth. But it also has a thing because Viper can constantly switch between dual wielding swords and attaching them together into a Darth Maul blade. Doing one attack in the combo advances both combos at the same time, so you can do the first hit in dual blade mode, but then switch to the second hit of the combined blade combo and stuff, based on how you go through the combo and stuff, different things happen. The other thing, Pictomancer has to like prepare some of its spells outside of combat, because if you do it inside the fight, there's a long cast time, but if you do it outside of battle, it's instant. And a lot of that is you paint these creatures onto your canvas, and then during battle you turn them into reality. So you summon the Moogle lasers.
Are you actually doing any sort of like art program thing?
No, the game. Oh. I don't think the game could actually support that.
I didn't think so either, but now I'm disappointed.
Yeah.
Let me go and bring out my like little noodle drawing on MS Paint and use it to go blow up dragons, please.
God, I fucking wish. But yeah, for most of the already existing jobs, what's happened is mainly just a small step in advancement, and they've said that it's likely that next expansion down the line in 8.0 they'll start working on diversifying the jobs more, because a lot of what's happened in Endwalker and Dawntrail is that a lot of the tanks and the healers have been moving towards having very similar skill sets. So they need to start making these jobs unique again, basically.
So Dawntrail comes out when again?
End of next month.
Do we have an exact date? Let's find out.
Yeah, hold on. It's on the front page of the wiki.
Dawntrail, July 2nd, 2024.
Right. So correct? Yes, the full. Right. Yes, everyone gets access July 2nd. Pre-order and patch date is June 28th.
Okay, so just a programming note, if you're looking forward to the next 2 months of Final Fantasy Wiki content, I guess next month we'll be talking about E3, in quotes.
Yeah, there'll probably be something at Summer Games Fest, yeah.
Increasingly vague remnants of the gaming calendar. E3, I guess we'll do that. And then July, it'll be Dawntrail times. And then God knows what we'll do in August. I don't know. Oh, I have an idea for August. I know what we're going to do for August. I'll keep that to myself. Do we have more? Anything else in Final Fantasy XIV related?
Right. Yeah, I guess that 14 tabletop role-playing game has started shipping. I don't think a lot of people have got their hands on it yet, so not much to talk about, although they did release a free preview on their website, and like, I mean, it seems like fairly basic. Like it's like a very mechanics light and combat heavy game. So yeah, kind of like Final Fantasy XIV.
Yeah, I might be interested in doing that if I ever had groups of friends in IRL who wanted to play Final Fantasy XIV in person. I don't think I'd ever want to play the MMO. MMO combat sucks. I played enough Xenogears to know it sucks.
Like, I mean, one thing that is neat about it is that they do actually have mechanics for the attacks like in the game itself, where thing will appear on the ground. You gotta get out of that before the cast finishes, or you get hit. Like the starter kit includes like a bunch of things that you can put on the map to indicate, oh, this is going to blow up in a couple turns' time. Get out of there.
Okay. Yeah, Final Fantasy XIV remains extremely popular, and the Warrior of Light is working on that facial hair, I see, so good for him. All right. I think that's all the news. Also, there was a rumor that Final Fantasy IX Remake might still be happening, but that's completely uncorroborated in any way, so we'll see if that ever happens. So, all right. So we should probably move on to our main topic then. What was our main topic again?
Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within.
Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. Now, whose idea was it to make us watch this?
Yours.
It was mine? I did this to us?
You were the one who noticed the similarities in plot between The Spirits Within and Seven Rebirth.
Okay, now do you agree with me on those similarities of plot?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Okay. I mean, the broad overview is that Spirits Within is kind of a remix of the Final Fantasy VII plot, with all the anime and swords cut out of it, turned into a very Western-focused feature-length film.
Yeah, and apparently they went with the original idea for Final Fantasy VII, which was to set it on Earth, in New York.
Yes.
And the Spirits Within? Yeah, because, like, partway through watching the movie, they're like, oh, we gotta get back to New York. I'm like, what? This is in New York? What the fuck?
The movie opens in New York. I mean, it opens in space, but literally the first place she goes is Times Square.
Yeah, it goes to Old New York, which, yeah, that kind of doomed how seriously this was going to be taken from the start, because, this came out like a year after Futurama started.
Oh, it did.
Yeah, it would be about a year after Futurama came out. Though this was in production for 4 whole years, which is how long this thing took to render. So, in many ways, Futurama stole this idea from them. Or Planet of the Apes. Actually, Planet of the Apes is where everyone took this from. If you ever see the second Planet of the Apes movie, they go underground and there's a race of mutants in old New York, and they worship an atomic bomb in a cathedral.
Ah.
Yes.
I didn't know about that, but
Yeah.
that does explain where Futurama got it from.
Yes. You know what? Actually, the mutants, they worship an atomic bomb too, and they're like, oh, but nobody's not too religious.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we've already wandered off track because Final Fantasy The Spirits Within is one of 3 Final Fantasy feature films. The first, and by far the most ambitious. This was quite a thing. I think I'm the only one, because both of you hadn't seen it until this week, right?
Right,
Yeah.
We've watched it last weekend.
Literally yesterday.
Okay. Alright, so I saw this in theaters in the year 2001. I can only tell you that this is before I had played any Final Fantasy game. I saw it with my family, and we were all completely baffled by this movie. It was a bizarre thing.
That sounds like the... I mean, I would guess that was the average reaction, yes, just from how I saw this. This was a very strange film.
Well, also it's got fuck all to do with Final Fantasy. Right.
Well,
aside from that, the 7 connection we just talked about, and the fact that there's someone in it called Sid. There's no chocobos show up.
There's a chocobo on somebody's desk, I think. It's like a wood carving of a chocobo.
Yeah, in the same way the Planet Pizza Planet appears in every Toy Story, Disney, Pixar movie. Same deal. Right. So there's no real chocobos show up. There's no real Moogles show up. There's not really a party, quote unquote, so to speak of. There's a single main character who, God, I feel bad for that voice actress because she was not in any way likable.
That was fucking RM Tia voice direction. She was so flat on everything.
Which actress are we talking about? Is this Aki Ross's?
Yeah, Aki Ross.
Aki Ross's.
Okay. So that actress is Ming-Na Wen, who was something of a big deal in the late 90s, early 2000s. I feel like maybe this movie sort of might have killed her career in some way, considering she did voice Mulan. No. She was on ER. And then you kind of never hear about her since then.
I'm sure the actress herself is fine. When it comes down to voice acting thing, it's almost always a direction issue.
Yes, I would say
I know she was fine.
The voice acting, directing in this movie. One thing I'd say is that Ming-Na Yen is much better than Alec Baldwin is. Alec Baldwin is horrendous in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
I
know Ming-Na Wen is fine because she was Mulan.
Yes.
Right? I know she's a good voice actress. It's just the direction was dreadful. I feel horrible for her in this role, right? And frankly, I feel horrible for everyone involved in the movie, to be honest. it just seems very ill-conceived.
Well, I don't feel bad for James Woods, but he kind of shows his path in life.
I don't know.
Yeah, that was and that wasn't even particularly great, James Woods. Like, if you gave Disney's Hades an orbital satellite cannon, I think he'd sell it better than General Hein did.
Yeah. You know what? One person, since we're talking about acting at this point, one person who I think actually does come out pretty well in this movie is Steve Buscemi.
Okay.
Which one was he? He plays basically the Private Hudson, considering the main crew are like these low-rent aliens guys. So he's like the Hudson. He hangs.
One?
He's what's his name? His name's like David or something in this movie. He dies. He gets killed. He's the pilot guy.
Yeah, like 2/3 of this film focuses on this group of 6 people. You have Aki, Sid, and what is his name, Gray, the actual main characters. And then you have these other 3 chucklefucks whose personality traits can be summed up as one is the annoying one is the black one is the girl one.
And
pretty much.
It is very reductive to say that Ving Rhames' character is just the black one, but that's kind of all he is. It's kind of dark in that way.
Which was the one? What was the name of the one guy who's set up to be Aki's love interest, and they have less than 0 chemistry?
That's great.
That's great, and like it's implied that they had a relationship before the story started, but like Aki has basically isolated herself from the rest of humanity to do her like looking for the spirits within.
Yes. Which is a very like video game ass plot of I have to go collect the 8 things, which is what I assumed when I saw this movie. I'm like, oh, I guess like there have been all these Final Fantasy games. I guess each one of these games has been Aki collecting one of the spirits. So this must be the culmination of everything. And maybe if I played the games, this would all kind of make sense. And no, that has nothing to do with anything. It was just made by video game people, so they wrote a plot that could be very well a video game level system.
Let's just say, if you want to watch a bad sci-fi movie, right, featuring a female main character who's a scientist, kind of, but then gets thrown in the midst of this battle for whatever reason, right, and it's about saving the world from these alien thingies, right, and it's basically a video game in a movie. You can watch Atlas. It's just as bad, and it's just as ill-conceived.
What?
And it's actually free.
What is that? I have no idea what that movie is.
Oh, it's a movie that just got released to Netflix.
Oh. Okay.
And it's pretty much like, I mean, obviously it's live action or whatever. It's pretty much the same thing. And, yeah.
I don't know if I could say this movie's worse than the standard Netflix slop of tropes thrown together.
Oh, yeah, I mean they're both the same level of bad, right? As of not very good movies, right? But at least Atlas has decent performances from people trying their best to sell that movie. Whereas the Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within has people who, you know, as we've just said, they're good actors, but they're given the worst direction possible. I don't know what it is about Square Enix movies and them just giving their actors not only just the worst dialogue, but telling them to deliver it in the worst possible ways.
Well, alright, I can explain a few things here. Like most of these people are live action actors. They are not voice actors. So this is already something of an unnatural ask for them. And from what I could tell, this shoot was not particularly rigorous because Ming-Na Yen mentions how making this movie did not interfere with her role on ER in any way. She was able to do both with no problem.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And to go back on the Netflix thing, I would say, for the very least, this movie has some place in something like history, because it was extremely ambitious for the time. This was one of the very first all-CG animation films. There had not been many before this. I think they were all Pixar. This is the first one that attempted anything like photorealism. It's the first one to try to be for adults, or at least not exclusively for children. I can't say this movie would be very good for children because they would just be extremely bored. I could report as a 10-year-old, having seen this movie was boring. And it did try for something like the environmentalism of Final Fantasy VII. However, once you extricate that from the whole anti-corporate story to an anti-military story, it sort of has no meaning whatsoever.
Like I can confidently say that it is thematically a Final Fantasy story. It's just got none of the substance that a lot of the games make effort to create a coherent world and put a lot into character development. But of course, the games have the benefit that they can put in more than 100 minutes of story.
No, and I don't think the graphics have aged super well, but when you have to remember at the context of the time when it came out, I'm sure it was extremely impressive back then.
It was. There had never been anything like this when this came out.
So here's the thing, like I said, I have one half of a good thing to say about this film in the Discord channel. I think the model work is actually quite good. Like, obviously it's a bit aged and the animation wasn't all there, but this does not feel 20 years behind what Square can do now. Despite that, I cannot say that this is a good-looking film because it has the color palette of an American-produced first-person shooter for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360.
It's very interesting you say that, because can you guess what major video game series actually took a lot of aesthetic inspiration from this movie?
I can guess. Is it Halo?
No.
I was going to say one of the futuristic setting Call of Duties.
It could be that too. It does feel like it's in conversation with all those things, but explicitly it was one video game series, and suddenly it's breaking. I can't remember what it was. It's the one where you get to bang aliens and you save the universe, and then everyone hated parts. What? Mass Effect.
Mass Effect?
Yeah, Mass Effect.
What?
Yep.
No fucking way.
Yeah.
No fucking way.
You know what? I can see it, but also that's fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
I can see it now you've mentioned it, but I would never have guessed.
Yeah, so, like, this... In many ways, this is one of the more influential Final Fantasy products, while itself having no influence whatsoever on anything Square did, except for showing up once in Life is Strange as a throwaway line.
No, yeah, and, since then, Square have released 2 movies, both of which I would say had mostly the same problems as this movie.
Yeah, but at the same time, both of them, I think, were better because they were essentially companion pieces. They do not have to establish this entire setting. Like, we know what the world of Final Fantasy VII is like. We know what the world of Final Fantasy 15 is like. And I have seen both of those, and I've come off them better because, like, Advent Children Complete, after a while I was just able to just turn my brain off and enjoy the action. And Kingsglaive, my worst impression after seeing it is, why the fuck wasn't this in the game?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, yeah. Well, that and the fact that, like, this, since after Kingsglaive, it felt like mostly, like, a lot of it didn't seem to be all that. It didn't show up in the FF15 story that much, but
they had to patch it into the FF15 story.
Yeah.
That's just.
Though if we're comparing,
I don't know how they managed that.
If we're comparing Final Fantasy movies, I had just seen Advent Children Complete back in, I think it was February or March, right before Rebirth came out. I could report that the voice acting of that has aged very poorly and is not much better than this.
Oh, unsurprising.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel horrible for Tifa's voice actress in that movie, she was done so badly, right? And again, knowing how The Spirits Within went, you can't possibly blame any of the seven Advent Children cast, because you know that they're given good voice actors for The Spirits Within and told, like, hey, can you do that, but a little less emotion, a little flatter?
Can you match the lip flaps? Dull? Can you match the lip flaps of the Japanese voice actors, please?
Do you know how in Star Wars Episode 1, like, Natalie Portman is basically told, be the flattest you can possibly be, have no expression whatsoever.
Keira Knightley.
Be the most boring. What's that?
Keira Knightley is the one that's told to be as flat as possible.
Oh, they both are, aren't they?
They're both in the movie. Natalie Portman is told to, because they're both playing Queen Amidala, and Keira Knightley's playing the fake one.
Whole, like, decoy shit.
Yeah, so she's doing, like, nothing. Keira Knightley is completely flat, and Natalie Portman is at least given something like personality.
Right, yeah. I'm with you now. Yeah. No, I mean, it's basically, it's that level of bad acting. Oh, sorry, bad direction from the acting you get from the movie. Well, that was the main thing I noticed. The other thing I noticed was equally how bad the dialogue was. There was one single line.
Mm-hmm.
There was one single line of dialogue that I thought was quite impressive, right?
I didn't think any of them were, but go ahead.
Well, there was this one line where it was like the annoying guy, as SCM alluded to. Annoying guy goes, looks like you gained some weight. And then girl character goes, it's called upper body strength, Neo, get a girlfriend. I'm like, okay, that got a chuckle out of me. But then everything else was a load of, like, the most generic dialogue you'll ever hear in your life. And it's like trying desperately to give these people something resembling a personality. And it's still the most painfully generic, most, like, nothing from it is remotely memorable.
Well,
and it's just so hard to take anything that's going on seriously.
I'll say Neil and whatever her name is, their banter at least is not actively painful, where Aki and Gray's when they have their scene together up on, like, the elevator thing, which is, like, completely contrived by his crew, which is almost psychopathic behavior, come to think of it. But anyway, like, that scene, I'm like, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. I don't want to watch this scene, so I'm gonna walk out.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I find it hard to care about anything that happens in this.
I didn't care about anything that happened. I was like, I wasn't really paying all that close attention most of the time because I was just so bored.
Well, I do have I have a positive note about this movie.
Oh, go on.
In terms of voice cast. One of the evil council, or kind of neutral council member peoples, is voiced by Keith David, who would go on to play Chaos in Dissidia.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I did notice that. Keith David has a very distinctive voice, so...
This is not the only early 2000s incredibly bad experimental CG movie that he is in. Let me tell you that.
But also...
yes.
Well, what was the other one?
I don't remember. Canio, The Prophecy or something. It was some crap movie I watched a few times in the 2000s because there was nudity in it.
Oh, okay. Well,
don't
also, like, what was the whole thing with the council being like, we don't trust Aki cannot be trusted, Aki is irrelevant, and we're just gonna pretend that everything is fine and we'll do nothing about the Phantoms. And then, like, one thing with the Phantom happens, and then, like, oh, just kidding, now the Phantoms are a threat. I'm like, they could have done some whole thing where it's like one of the council was, like, controlled by the Phantoms and was, like, convincing them to not do anything about the threat. Specifically so that they would remain vulnerable. It's like you could have done something with that, but instead it's just a bunch of like
I believe the implication was that Hines sabotaged the fences so that he could get authorization to use his orbital satellite cannon.
It's explicitly that. Well, by the way, we have not actually explained the plot of this movie, so maybe we should do that. We've already kind of wandered a bit. All right, so why don't we do a real quick one? So it's the year 20-something or other. It doesn't matter when it is. Earth has become a wasteland because we've been invaded by a race of alien ghosts called the Phantoms or the Spirits or something. Humans are left to these big, like, circus tent-looking shielded cities, one of which is Lower Manhattan. And Aki Ross is part of a science group, which consists of just her and her boss, Sid, Dr. Sid, to collect the 8 spirits, which will do some cockamamie hippy-dippy stuff to connect with the Gaia life stream and then save the Earth. And meanwhile, there's evil General Hine, played by James Woods, who is a disturbingly bad-looking effect. His face is just awful-looking. I hate looking at it. He wants to go and use a big giant orbital cannon to go blow up the alien asteroid, but all that's going to do is make the asteroid dig deeper in and infect the life stream more. And then they stop that. Also, Aki Ross has a spirit inside her already, and she's possessed by a evil phantom that's slowly growing like a tumor. There you go.
And then she has a bunch of dreams.
She has dreams because, it turns out the alien planet exploded and has now become like an infection in our life stream. So we must destroy these aliens, but the good way, not destroy them the bad way with guns. We have to destroy them the hippy-dippy way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you're still destroying them, ultimately.
Yeah.
There's no message of, like, togetherness or understanding. You're still, like, wiping out this alien force.
Yeah, and, like, whatever. They, like, get up to, like, 6 or 7 spirits or so, and then Aki gets found by Gray, like, her ex, who's a soldier man who can fight the Phantoms with his 3 generic friends by shooting at them.
Yep.
Somewhat effectively.
Sometimes effectively, sometimes not. It's very unclear how to kill them.
Sometimes effectively, sometimes not effectively, yeah.
Depends on who has plot armor or not.
Yes.
Yeah, basically.
The Phantoms also are, like, just terrible looking. They are probably the most unsuccessful effect in this movie, because they're just, like, see-through Starship Trooper-looking aliens. They're like mostly like random tentacles. They're not a good silhouette, which is bad because all they are is a silhouette.
Yeah. They're basically just orange translucent things with tentacles attached. It's but yeah, anyway, like they're going out to like find the last few spirits, and then Hines sets it up so that the Phantoms can attack the city in New York. And honestly, I kind of stopped paying attention for this segment of the plot. There's basically one scene where they just kill off all 3 of the generic guys.
Yeah, well, Hine decides to have a small infection of, like, just a few ones to scare off the council, who are, like, ambivalent towards him and also ambivalent towards Dr. Sid. But then it turns out, oh wait, these things can pass through everything, so they can go through the pipes that for some reason he thought these ghosts would not be able to pass through. Like, I don't know how you haven't dealt with these things for 20 years without realizing they could just pass through walls, dude.
Right.
So that all goes bad, and yeah, the 3 generic guys get killed. Steve Buscemi almost gets a girlfriend, but they both get killed off immediately. Ving Rhames, they leave to die. They fly off to the meteor, and it turns out the last spirit is actually a phantom, just to make things extra confusing. And then that phantom dies, but then another phantom becomes the spirit. which is the one inside Aki already.
Yeah. Meanwhile, while they're trying to find this Phantom, like, Heinz gotten his approval to use his space orbital cannon, and he just keeps firing it again and again at the meteor.
Which makes the Phantom stronger. For some reason.
Yeah, which is making them stronger, while he's also arguing with the computer of the cannon that, like, he's overloading the system. They're like, I know, keep firing it, and eventually he explodes.
Actually, that's the funniest part of the movie, which is him, like, slamming on the firing trigger over and over again, and, like, he's getting all these alert messages. Yeah. He's like, will you shut up? I know what I'm doing. And then, like, the entire space station's been exploding for, like, 5 minutes straight. At this point, the explosion's so long. And then he turns around and he's like...
when there was they had that alert that comes out. It's like, evacuate the premises immediately. Evacuate the premises immediately. Yeah. And then one of the generic goes, I think we need to evacuate the premises immediately. And I'm like, okay, there's the second part of dialogue in the whole movie that I actually remember.
Well, the one bit of dialogue I remember is General Heinz still firing the trigger, and he's like, shut up, computer. And then he turns around, and he goes, oh, wait, we're exploding, aren't we? And then he explodes.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah. Rest in peace, James Woods. He looks like Chucky. Is what General Heinz looks like. He looks like the serial killer Chucky, the little doll. He's got dead eyes like Chucky does.
So, there was no, like, when we were going back and, like, researching how this movie was made, there was nothing about what gave Sakaguchi the idea of this plot.
Well, Sakaguchi is not the only writer on this. He's like the original story writer. The other two are Al Reinhardt, and I have all these notes. Let me pull them up. Here we are. So, Al Reinhardt wrote some version of the screenplay. He's like, most of his career is working in sort of NASA projects in the 90s, so he wrote part of Apollo 13. The other screenplay writer is...
That was the movie.
Yeah. The other credited screenplay writer is Jeff Vinter, who co-wrote iRobot. But I don't think most of what he wrote about iRobot actually ended up in, like, theaters, because Akiva Goldsman is also credited on that movie. And Goldsman is like a notorious screenplay fixer. He'll come in when your movie's, like, completely ruined and put something that can at least be shot. Which is why most of his credits are really, really bad movies. Don't try to avoid anything with Akiva Goldsman written on it. So those three came together. I can only imagine that the two Western writers were here to try to make this more palatable towards American audiences.
And they didn't really succeed.
Yeah, this was... We haven't really mentioned that this is Square Pictures' like only project. So this is a major... like thing that was pushed by Square in the late 90s to branch into movies, considering Final Fantasy 7 and 8 and 9 were such big FMV projects. And actually Final Fantasy 9 only exists because of this movie, because Sakaguchi also wanted to make a video game while he was out in Hawaii. So then they like spun up like this side project, and it turned out to be like the best Final Fantasy game ever made.
Right.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That is crazy. So while he's spending 4 years on this life passion like movie that's supposed to be this major launch and innovation, his side project is the thing that people actually remember and love. It's kind of wild.
Yeah. Well, that's like what happened with Disney around the same time. Like, they were all thinking like, oh, Pocahontas, that's going to be our next big one. That's going to be this huge movie. And then on the side, they were making The Lion King.
Yep.
And they were like, it's the same exact concept.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Sakaguchi just really loves Hawaii. Like right now, you can probably find him just in his house in Hawaii, downing a glass of champagne. Like at the end of last year, there was one final thing for like the Final Fantasy 14 10th anniversary, where there were a bunch of like happy anniversary and New Year messages from staff and friends of staff. And the first video they put out was basically just Sakaguchi downing a glass of champagne.
Good for him, you know.
No.
This did basically end Sakaguchi's career with Square, which would later become Square Enix. The entire story that this is why the Square Enix merger happened is, as far as I can tell, completely apocryphal. That merger was already planned.
Yeah, from what I understand, it's kind of the opposite. Like, that was such a financial fuck-up that it actually lessened, that it actually lowered Enix's... it actually caused Enix to get a bit nervous about it, and like Sony had to intervene and say, "Look, hey, we can like help fund some of this if you actually go through with it."
Yeah. So Sakaguchi, I don't think he's worked in any way with Square Enix stuff since, other than like special thanks, right?
Yeah, special thanks, and I guess
his
like
last was 10-2.
Yeah, like he's never had a direct role, although he is obviously good friends with Studio 3 in particular, because like dude really likes 14.
I mean, I understand a lot of people like 14.
Yeah.
I also don't understand it at all because I don't know why anyone likes MMOs, but I understand like conceptually. We should not forget the co-director on this movie. That is Monotori Sakakibara. I'll try another take on that. Motonori Sakikibara. I think that's right. That's my best guess. He's got a very long Japanese name. I'm sorry, I'm not good with these names. He was the CG director on Final Fantasy VII and 8. He has worked mostly in CG movies since. He did not go back to Square. But he did make the CG version of Mewtwo Strikes Back in 2019. That's the most notable credit I can find.
Yeah.
The music is done by Elliot Goldenthal. See, I can also fail at Western names, too. So he was very big in the 90s. He did the score for Heat and Demolition Man. Also Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. I can actually hear notes from Batman Forever in the score of this movie too, to be honest.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Aside from like that one song in the latter half of the credits, the soundtrack on this was completely forgettable to me.
It is not Goldenthal's best work, let's say. This was produced by Chris Lee, who was a big shot in Columbia TriStar in the 90s, which were owned by Sony. But after the merger, and I think after this movie, he kind of like went on his own and did individual projects, which include Superman Returns and Ballistic X vs. Sever. The Antonio Banderas versus Lucy Liu epic bomb movie, which I think might be even worse than this one is. I've not seen it. I think those are all the major crew people. What?
Even bigger of a box office bomb, or like just a worst movie?
You know, I kind of feel like box office bomb is sort of a hard thing to tell, but I can say that this completely killed the studio, Square Pictures. Like Sony and Square, everyone immediately pulled the plug on this entire venture. They would only go on to make one more thing, which is the Matrix, Animatrix short, Last Flight of the Osiris.
Yep.
Which also has not quite nudity, but near nudity. If you're interested in early 2000s CG projects with nudity in them. Some of us might have been at the time.
Like, part of the marketing for this movie was them massively sexualizing Aki Ross.
Yes, this is unfortunate.
Which is so weird.
Yeah.
Which is so weird. And like you say, unfortunate. Because of how she's portrayed in the movie itself, where she's nothing like that.
She is not a sexual character really in any way in this movie.
Like they were convinced that Aki Ross was going to be the next big thing. Like, you have this actor that you can this actor that you can just transplant into any film, like the first CG actor.
Yeah, the idea was she would be a digital actress they could reuse.
Yeah, and then not only was the only film she was ever used in not good, because they were so obsessed with like showing off how they like perfectly animated all her hair. They kept having her do weird movements just so that the hair could flow around a bit.
They have her in Zero G at the beginning of this movie with flowing hair, which is extremely impressive. Doing hair movement in CG is very, very difficult, even now.
Yes, technologically very impressive. As part of a film and not a tech demo, what the fuck is this?
So you're saying that this should have been Agni's philosophy instead of like a movie?
Actually, yeah, that like if you just wanted to show off what you're capable of doing, it's better to just make something short that just hits on all these things instead of like a motion picture.
Oh, by the way, I don't want to move too far beyond the whole Aki Ross thing, because notoriously they did have pinup model pictures of her where she's in a purple bikini for some reason. I think there's also nude versions of her too that leaked around. Memory serves. I don't know why this was done. This is that early 2000s era where there would be all like Maxim magazines would have all the babes of video games and have like Lara Croft there and who knows else, Tifa, of course. It was a regrettable time for many reasons.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. And look, I mean, it's just like it's just a product of a different era. Very clearly.
Yeah.
It's not aged well. And you can say that about most of the things in this movie.
It's not even that it's from a different era, because it really wasn't from this era either. Like, nothing else like this came out at the time. It was so strange. I can tell you, going off the Wikipedia page, that this debuted in 4th place. Can you guess which movies it fell behind in the American box office on July 11th, 2001? Any guesses at all?
I don't know enough about cinema to know what it was competing against.
Okay. All right, you know what? That's a tough question. It ended up in 4th place behind Legally Blonde, The Score, I have no idea what that movie is, and Cats and Dogs, a children's movie about spy cats and spy dogs, which I remember seeing, and actually that movie was worse than this one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a trashy kids film.
I don't know anything about that one, but I do know that like Legally Blonde is a classic.
Legally Blonde is a classic. Yes, it was a tough weekend. They couldn't have known. It did not get particularly great reviews, all things told. Currently at 44% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, it's like from what I remember, the reviews at the time were almost universally bad, except for Roger Ebert, because like his personal philosophy was like he would like trash as long as it was original trash, and The Spirits Within was definitely original trash.
I mean, I'm going to say, if you're going to the theaters and let's say the previous movie you saw was Cats and Dogs, and then you go to see The Spirits Within, I would definitely take Spirits Within. Because one, at least, is a technical marvel, something that had never been attempted before, and kind of never been attempted since, honestly, in some ways. Not until, like, Avatar was a movie like this sort of done. And even that relies so heavily on live action to sell it.
I mean, like, I guess the other close equivalent to this, as far as like what it was trying to do, was probably Toy Story. You know,
well, yeah,
as being like a first of its kind of we're doing a new type of movie with a new type of animation style thing. Except Toy Story was actually a good movie.
Yeah, Toy Story was actually well written.
Toy Story did not try for this level of photorealism, and specifically was about plastic people because they couldn't convincingly do humans that well. Like, everyone knows this bit of trivia, right?
Nightmare-inducing.
Everyone knows the bit of trivia that all of Andy's friends at his birthday party are just like copies of his model with different hats on.
Yeah.
But anyway, thanks to stuff in the various gachas, Toy Story has been in more Square Enix games than The Spirits Within has been.
Yeah. I mean, James Woods never would be in another Final Fantasy project again, but he at least is in multiple games with Cloud Strife in it. We never mentioned that Donald Sutherland's in this movie. Donald Sutherland's in this movie. He's Donald Sutherland. I think we're almost out of things to talk about. This is kind of... I don't know. It was... I paid $3.99 for this thing, and I feel dumb for that. Considering... how did you two watch it? I think I gave you the link, right?
Yeah, you gave us a Daily Motion video.
Yes.
You know what? Something that I kind of realized that this film essentially has the same ending as Final Fantasy 15 and 16. like it's because like the male lead dies, but the world is vaguely going to be better afterward.
Oh yeah, I never actually finished I never finished the plot summary all that well because it gets like the end of this movie, like the last 20 minutes are like delirious in how confusing it is. Cuz like you're established, okay, the spirits are random living things on Earth. They're like a little like branch or like a bird or something.
Yeah.
All right, but then they find one's a phantom. Which is like, wait, how does that work? That's completely against the thing. They say there's this cannon that's going to kill the phantoms. No, it makes them stronger. Oh, they accidentally kill the 8th spirit. I guess we're doomed. No, the 8th spirit just reappears. Oh, I guess Aki Ross has to go and sacrifice herself considering she's completed the sequence. No, she can pass it into Gray, who will then sacrifice himself. For I don't know why is he volunteering to kill himself considering...
Yeah, and then... Yeah, like, and then, like, his soul gets sucked out, because that's how the Phantoms, like, kill people. Like, they touch someone and their soul just flies out of their body.
That's the one cool visual, is, like, people's soul getting sucked out and them screaming.
Yeah.
I like that.
That was a good effect.
So anyway, Grey gets sucked out, and then, like, the entire alien live stream turns to ice or something.
Yeah. And then it snows positivity.
Yeah.
And then everyone lives happily ever after.
And then there's a shot that looks like the opening of a CG trailer for an Assassin's Creed, the end.
And then like a bad song plays over the credits. I don't fully remember.
Yeah. But yeah, that is basically the same ending that 15 and 16 have. Like both of these all three of these endings, basically they're basically like, yeah, they're technically in a state they can win, but there's no way to make it out of there alive. And so like the hero dies and like the world presumably gets better, but you don't see any of that. You just have to take the story's word for it. The things are going to get better.
You have to take their word for it that anyone's alive anywhere, considering the only place they've ever seen with people in it, everyone's dead.
Yeah. Also in two of those three examples, so Spirits Within and 15, nearly everyone's fucking dead. So,
yeah, you get to go out into the wastelands of New Jersey and try to farm in the fucking completely eviscerated dust world.
God.
Yep.
Yeah.
I will say one other thing. This, like, I said this doesn't remind me of anything else at the time, but it does remind me in some way of the Matrix sequels, where it's like, alright, it gets caught up in the whole politics of councils and things. That kind of feels like Zion. The whole battle against, like, this idiot militarist, that's also in Zion there. The fact that the movies end on this completely confusing sort of Messiah metaphor. The fact that there's sort of a loss of all human connection and sort of a new focus on really ugly gunmetal gray technical crap.
Mm-hmm.
A really bad romance that everyone insists on telling me is the best romance of all time. I'm sorry, but Neo and Trinity in the sequels, their romance is so badly forced. It gets fixed in the fourth movie.
That was You mean Neo and Trinity?
Yeah, Neo and Trinity.
Yeah, fixing in the fourth, but it's bad in the first one and dreadful in the second and third.
It's okay in the first one. The first one, they're the two hottest people on that boat, so I understand why they're together. In the second and third one, it's like, what, you two don't really share much of anything other than the movie telling me this is the greatest romance it's ever been. Romance and romance and romance and choice and romance. The Matrix sequels are better than this movie, but they have the same fundamental. They have fundamental flaws in similar ways.
Do you think this is still better than Matrix 3?
Absolutely. No. I'm sorry. Okay. Matrix 3 is better than this movie. I would take Matrix 3 any day.
Okay. I would agree, but not by much.
I'd just say Matrix 3, there isn't the same uncanny valley of looking at dead eyes.
Yeah.
That's kind of the big problem in this movie. You just look at, like, General Hine and you start to think that this is, like, a mounted corpse. And it's very disturbing. I don't like his face. I can keep going on forever about how much I hate his face.
Yeah. And, like, we can talk about a bunch of things that, we'd rather over this because, this is definitely the worst Square Enix, like, film product I've seen. Because, like, I mean, I talked about Advent Children and Kingsglaive earlier, but also, like, my first viewing of Legends of the Crystals is on the YouTube channel. You can go and listen to that. That was fucking hilarious. Like, not intentionally hilarious.
Oh, yeah. But, that was funny.
I've actually never seen that one.
Okay, maybe partially intentionally hilarious because there's that one bit with the alarm in the pirate's hideout that was like the most deliberately stupid sex joke that they could pull off. That was definitely deliberate, but
was it stupid?
Yeah, it was like the alarm was like a statue, and the two breast cups were metal, and the alarm just banged between those two, and just like, and I think you hear me burst out laughing at that bit because it's just so absurd. And yeah, like that's like, I think there's a lot more of that that's unintentionally funny than intentionally funny, but that's still like kind of enjoyable because of how stupid it is. This is too boring to enjoy how stupid it is.
Yeah, the action's not good, the comedy's not good, the romance is really bad, and the faces are disturbing at times.
Right.
Yeah. I'm thinking if I'm going to rank the Final Fantasy movies, and I'm just going to count the movies, not any OVAs or anything. All right, Advent Children, number 1, especially with the complete editions.
Easy.
Yep.
Easy.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think I'd go this 2, and then Kingsglaive 3. Because I'm going to say one thing. I've never forgotten this movie. I saw it when I was 10 years old, and I'm mildly been fascinated by it ever since because it was so strange, and it was such a misfire. I can tell you that I have not thought about Kingsglaive since we did our podcast about it back like 10 years ago.
I'm of roughly the same opinion, but I would flip them for the exact opposite reason.
Okay.
Which is that, this movie is bad, and you remember, like, the bad stuff, right? You remember the things about it that just simply did not work. Whereas Kingsglaive, like you say, I've completely forgotten about it. So Kingsglaive is absolutely nothing. Whereas this is just something, but the something it is bad.
Yeah, this is absolutely more memorable. Because it like Kingsglaive, I mean, yeah, it's probably more coherent and has better action scenes. It has stuff like the somewhat biological-looking diamond weapon, which is fucking weird.
Yeah, there is that, I guess.
And Ultros. I remember the thing I remember about Kingsglaive is Ultros.
That's got Ultros in it.
Yeah. I'm like, where the fuck was he in the game?
And there's the point that that Spirits Within is more memorable because I should have fucking remembered that.
Right.
Yeah, there's no like that's the annoying thing if you're like a Final Fantasy wiki writer is like, oh, where's Bahamut? Where's all my various callbacks? I can't write any wiki pages about this because it doesn't connect to the rest of the whole series.
I know. At least Kingsglaive has that one scene with Arden in it that's very good, and it has nothing else.
I don't think I like the faces in Kingsglaive. They're like too photoreal.
It's
like a step too far.
One other thing I can remember about Kingsglaive is like, yeah, we knew Noctis's dad was going to die, but you didn't have to rub it in by casting Sean Bean.
Oh yeah. Oh yes, of course. Sean Bean, perpetual death. At that time, that was like peak Sean Bean dies in every movie meme too.
Yeah. I think that truly peaked with when Hitman 2 came out. Like this was just after IO had split from Square Enix, and like Hitman 2, they announced, yes, the first limited time target we're adding to the game, it's just Sean Bean as a spy.
You know what's interesting? This movie has Steve Buscemi, Spirits Within. He also died in like every movie he was in the 90s.
Yeah.
He kept running his run here, like Big Lebowski and God, what else was he in? Now that you put me on the spot, I put myself on the spot, and I got to remember movies. Fucking Fargo, he died in that. Big Lebowski, the Antonio Banderas mariachi movie, Desperado. He gets shot many times in that. You can find a YouTube compilation of the best Steve Buscemi deaths. Later, he would die in The Sopranos and Boardwalk Empire. Spoilers. We should bring Steve Buscemi back for a Final Fantasy game. I think he would do well as a Cid. And then die, of course. So, is that everything we have to say about this nonsense movie?
I think so.
Okay. I do want to credit the real stars of this movie as far as I'm concerned. These were as many technical director-looking people I could find. These people are Troy Brooks, Kevin Ox, Dave Seeger, Kevin Bjork, Kaveh Karde, who are all production systems supervisor, character technical director, lighting supervisor, rendering and shading supervisor, and manager R&D. So everyone that had anything to do in terms of visual effects and CG and VFX and rigging and all those sorts of things, you really accomplished something incredible. And if I were like teaching a class on how to be a CG artist, I think I would like make this required viewing. Because I think this movie is really important in terms of where CG was in the 90s and where it became now in terms of making things photorealistic. It is probably an extremely important movie on that level in terms of technical details. But in terms of actually watching a movie, for a movie to be entertained, you don't want to watch this. It's not even a fun, bad movie in that way. And, alright, so now we gotta watch all Final Fantasy Unlimited.
Oh, I'm good.
All 26 episodes. That that anime's not bad.
Oh, it's not?
It's okay.
I'd be willing to be up for that if we know where to find it. Like, I'm
I
sure
can find it immediately.
I'm sure there's some Dailymotion account that's taking care of it.
Oh, you'd go to Watch Cartoons Online for that one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Not many people listen to this podcast, so I'm willing to just be loud about that. Just go to Watch Cartoons Online, WCO, something along those lines. There's plenty of websites that are still hosting the stuff. For all I know, all this crap could be on YouTube. Nobody cares about that show, which is a shame. It's okay. It is much more of a Final Fantasy thing than this movie is, in many ways. There's chocobos in it, and Moogles. There's a lady who does kung fu and has large breasts. Techno, you'd love it.
If you say so.
I'm not accusing you of anything other than what you constantly say every single month here.
Do I?
Yeah, your Tifa obsession. If I'm going beyond bounds, I can cut this clip if you want.
I do actually have like some last-minute Final Fantasy XIV news that's popped up recently.
Okay.
Because you know, a couple of episodes ago, I mentioned that like the benchmark that turned out like that they got a lot of criticism because the lighting wasn't updated while the character models were. That looked everything really weird. So like they've said, yeah, there's we've pretty much done with the benchmark. It's going to be out on the 3rd, and there's actually this one screenshot that kind of demonstrates. Yeah, the biggest problem was the lighting. I'm just going to post it in our podcast channel. The one on the left is the lighting that was in the game since 2013, and the one on the right
massively improved it.
It looks... I am not a lighting expert. The one on the right just looks brighter to me.
Yeah. But it looks so much better.
The thing is, the one on the left is like that is what you were faced with in the character creator, and nothing in the game really looks like that. So it was a horrible lighting thing, and then just got compounded by the changes, causing a lot of the things they did. A lot of things they did to make things look better, not carrying over to the new character models. There's also another comparison that shows some of the other changes they had to do. Okay. And like, there's also a bunch of model changes, but yeah, the lighting was the biggest problem, and that's fixed now.
Okay, this image is better because the first image, it just looked like there were more sources of lights on this brown-haired chap here. Now I can see clearly the background details pop out more, and I could see more of this tower here, where before it was just kind of a flat slab of brownish gray.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. The game itself didn't look like that. It's just that this character creator was uniquely bad, and they never did anything to improve it while they were improving the graphics engine.
Also, the font is Final Fantasy XII font? Has that always been the case?
Yeah.
Oh, huh. Today I learned.
This is the Department of Ivalice, fanboys.
Okay. As long as we're doing last-minute news sources, considering we're doing this late, we're recording after Sony's big state of play for summer 2024. The Final Fantasy news is... none. There's none.
Nothing.
Nothing. You get nothing. Enjoy Concord. So, anyway, I guess we'll wrap up there.
Yeah, you know, hey, at least we got a sequel to the best PS5 exclusive, the tech demo that comes with the console.
Yes, Astro's Playroom is. Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm going to say Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a better game than Astro's Playroom, but it is very close. Also, one is considerably shorter.
Also, by the end of 2025, it's probably not going to be an exclusive.
I'm going to defend Ratchet and Clank until I die, but then I just remembered that's not a PS5 exclusive anymore.
Okay, I don't care about exclusivity. I'm just going to say best game on the system in any way.
Okay, yes, that's Rebirth.
It's Rebirth.
Okay.
Easily Rebirth.
Well, the problem is that the PlayStation 4 is backwards compatible, so actually the best game on that system would probably be Witcher 3. But, you know.
That doesn't count.
You can download...
That doesn't count.
I mean, you can download Undertale on that thing. I could probably mod it to play the original Final Fantasy... Actually, not the PlayStation 5. You can't do that. Not yet, at least.
The original Final Fantasy VII's on PlayStation 5. There's a port of the PS4.
Right.
There's the PS4 port.
Okay, alright, so we're good. So anyway, this is the Final Fantasy Wiki Podcast. I'm your host, BlueHighwind. Our podcast music is La Montana de los Jovenes Caballeros off the OC Ruin, whatever, etc. You know the deal. You know. I say it a lot at this point. I think you should probably know the whole thing.
We have the important credits in the
We do have it in the podcast thing, yeah. Yeah, XPRTNovice did that music, and it's on an album called something or other. Balance and Ruin by Overclock Remix, those guys. And also the wikis at final.wiki.fandom.
Of all the bad attempts, I think that was the worst.
Whatever it's called.
Eventually, this guy's gonna have to start trying to secure some of these domains so that you can. I'm sure final.wiki doesn't point to anything.
It's at fantasyfootball.fandom.com. That's where you need to go to. Okay. All right. Well, good night, everybody.
Hey.
I'm gonna go to bed.